What's up, folks? Welcome back to my tubes. There are many tubes, but these are my tubes. We're putting some base around the bottom of this piece. It's a little too simple, and I thought about putting crown around the top, but that's something that we do when you're going to see the whole piece from the house. So I'm trying to flip my thinking this year. I think we're going to kind of stay down here, and we're going to lose the tops of these pieces always, if not most of the time. So more of a focus on the bottom, and I think it's going to work to our advantage here anyway. You know, to have this kind of a sort of even bigger still footprint here. It just implies that this is a really heavy building, made of like, you know, like a sandstone or something, or concrete blocks. Either way, that it's not made of 2x4 and Luan, which is what I like to try and stay away from with all costs, at all costs. Which is why I bulk things out and just change the dimensions enough so that your eye doesn't easily find that stuff, at least if you're not a carpenter. So I'm going to go all around with 2x12, which I started by, I didn't use the joiner, I used the table saw to take the edges off, take that round off, just it was easier to be sure that my setup on the table saw was the same when I sent all the boards through, and when I was done, everything was exactly this, you know, all the pieces were, the two boards were exactly the same width, so I didn't have issues when it came to doing things like that. Which the number of passes you make on the joiner is another way, you know, you can count, but I just didn't end up doing it that way. And then I planed both sides to try and take any mild cupping or texture, you know, from the Sawyer and stuff like this stuff. I wanted out of there because that all just betrays the fact that it's wood. So we got down, I milled the two 8-foot pieces that I bought together, the same. And I had done some measuring and was thinking 8 feet will get me around either of the sides. I'm going to end up needing, I don't quite have enough left to do the last piece of it. So I have a couple blocks in the basement I'll have to process to try and match. In the end, it won't be the end of the world. But I wanted, once again, not to be 1.5 inches thick, because you can just kind of see that. And in the scheme of things, everything's about ratios here. And if the thickness of the base is only 1.5 inches on something so massive, it just doesn't look correct. It's too small, and it ends up looking, you know, 2.5D instead of 3D. You know, like a set, and I'm trying to avoid that. So, well, I didn't want to go all in and buy 3 inches of material. I just did the math and laid out what I had for a real measurement here on the inside, and then what I wanted, you know, for pieces all the way around, and obviously 45 comes off the corners of everything. So I got some rhombuses in here, some trapezoids, and actually this piece is the same. It just translates out of, you know, its whole ways. Same here. So basically all the rhombuses just are the same piece that you would make if you're trying to fit snug. They're just translated over, and then where we dead end, they're longer by 1.5 inches, plus, you know, whatever you need to stay away from the wall, the same amount. And this trapezoid here has got to be greater in length on both ends. So anyway, I just did that made a little cheat sheet. Now this is another place where making these pieces, manufacturing the ladders and all the little studs in them on the miter saw with an end stop so they're absolutely the same, carefully assembling everything. That video that's got the lowest amount of views in this series because nobody wants to listen to it. It's boring as hell, even more so than the rest of my content, which is ultra boring, and I'm really sorry about it. But making fine rectangular prisms that are very well crafted and perfectly as close as possible, the same width all the way down, and then screwing them to the floor and using a square to make sure these 90s are at 90 degrees. Now when I'm trying to make something cool like this, it's a difficult kind of high-level task. Don't let me break my arm off patting myself on the back. But not only is it difficult to monkey with this lumber that isn't intended for finish purposes and to hide the fact that it's wood when you want things to look like stone, and to do all of these measurements, I don't have any funky little fractions. I've only got, you know, 3/8. Everything's to the 1/8 of an inch, 7/8. You know, and there's some other even heavier things in there. I haven't got to finally try to fit anything to start with. But not only that, as one set of measurements will be fine, I just mirror this project to the other side, and because I checked over here, and they're all absolutely the same as this far side here. So instead of sitting down and making all kinds of ultra custom pieces and then ultra custom pieces again, this is already kind of, you know, time intensive here, relatively speaking. If I was making a third storefront, I wouldn't be getting to put these pieces in at all. So don't let me jinx myself here, but because we omitted even making a third facade, I've got the ability to embellish and add to these pieces, which I think is going to be meaningful and interesting in the end. That being said, and being careful from the beginning, like I said in that video that nobody watched, now I have an easier time of doing this. It's still, there's some cupping to these pieces, but I love my miter saw because rather than a laser or something else, this throws a shadow where the kerf of the saw is going to go. And so when I'm making long cuts like this that are miters, I do, instead of putting just a little dash and letting the kerf of the saw project through the dash and know that I'm making a 90-degree cut when the saw is vertical, I do bother to draw the whole cross-cut line when I'm operating in such a wide width here, because if it cups, I can kind of negotiate. I can set it down at the back so that the kerf's coming in along the line, and as the kerf's departing the line in the middle of the cut, I can rock the piece the other direction and bring that shadow in closer and continue to finish the cut. And in the end, I've got as good as you're going to basically do here with such a sort of a brutalic tool instead of, you know, hand cutting or doing anything here. And then in the end, we're going to address the outside and inside corners, you know, with a router bit, and put a round on here and a small round on there, like 1/4 of an inch or something, because that's what would be in there anyway. These knife edges, they're called, just don't seem like stone when it's such a hard shadow between highlight and shadow. It should be a very thin gradient as the light goes around the corner on that tiny round, and your brain writes it off even better. And again, I've been saying a couple times in the series, we're going to try and convince people or try to trick people that we're not. No one believes that it's what we're trying to make here for real, but it's the suspension of disbelief. The thought popping into somebody's head, oh, it's a pretty cool set, but that, you know, is weak, like this or like that, is what we try to avoid. We don't want to pique anyone's interest. We want it to be taken for granted and not questioned throughout the whole show. And that's the goal here from the set perspective. There's plenty of other things to worry about in a show like this, but this is coming together down here. Is it a hotel? Is it a bank? Haven't decided yet. I've said a few different things. Now, I had these sconces that were real big and cool. I have 4 of them. I only have glass for 2 of them, which is going to be fine for us here. I'm going to have to put them in here. I'm going to have a student move them up and down. I'd probably put them up higher if we were going to see the whole set from the house, because again, the higher you go, the more it implies that everything keeps going right up and out of sight. But I think it might play right up and out of our framing for the most part on this shoot if it's too high. So I may cheat it down in a way that when we do back off, it doesn't look too low, but it's as low as you can get to keep as much of it in the frame as possible. And we don't walk up to things on skyscrapers that are right in our face. Same with sconces on our homes. People put them at 7 feet and stuff like that. I think it just looks ridiculous. You know, too low. You want to pay attention to these ratios. It's always about ratios. How much of the surface is below with relationship to how much is above to either side. You can scale things up and down infinitely if your ratios are in good shape. So that's cool. Gray still needed across the top there. It's just kind of up on the ladder task. Got our window decor coming in. We're going to try and drop a pendant light in the middle and some plants on either side here. Put a little branding on our fake bags of coffee. We've got plain black mugs because we were considering that the few items that'll be inside the store for a scene that has some action inside the plane of this facade could all be black in there, since the back of all these pieces is black, as a creative choice. So we're just kind of mocking that up. Some little chalkboard things we got to, you know, write some stuff on, and a little bit of trimming left to do here. And then I want to come through and do some highlight and shadow with a big natural sponge or handfuls of paper towel or something to add some texture to all this concrete, and then swipe through. I normally take the color in question and put in 30 to 50% white, and sometimes a little yellow depending on what I'm, you know, if it's a fine piece of artwork, but white works fine for sets, to create a highlight color that can be dry brushed over. And we're just trying to catch the top of all these surfaces and leave this relatively darker color as opposed to that in the bottom of that stuff, and it should pop all those lines even more than they're already popping now. We're going to hammer this thing with light, and the more light you use and fill with, the more those shadows disappear. So, you know, I said I harped a lot on, see all these natural lines that we're getting here that are all ostensibly parallel and trace out and around. There's just a busy amount of planes and highlight and shadow going on around these openings, which gives it credence visually. And again, like I was saying a moment ago, doesn't cause you to go, yeah, I don't know, you know, sets are cool. We're just looking to sell it a little more. And where are the corbels? Corbels go underneath. Here they are. Here we got the bottom of those bottles glued into a couple of them appropriately after we did like a router pass on the hole itself. Use a little construction adhesive there. They're in there really nice. Boy, that PL polyurethane adhesive, you wouldn't think you could glue to a polyethylene or HDPE or whatever those bottles are. You know, you'd think it would just pop off, but I mean, if I blasted it with a hammer, I'm not sure whether it would break or if it would break away from the glue, honestly. It's quite, you know, it's on there real well. And I put a heavy coat of latex paint over everything, which kind of, you know, skins it. And each year we use these and recoat them. It'll kind of make one monolith, you know, one solid monolith out of the thing after a while. Could use a little bit more body work. I wish I had an offset follower for, you know, a small tiny pin sticking out of the foot of the router basically that would follow this edge and allow me to use the V-carve bit, you know, to basically put a carve line that follows this profile in about there. That's kind of all it's missing, I think. You know, no big deal though. So things are really coming together. I think I'm going to paint the lamp post before I leave today because it's going to stink the place up. But I've been trying to paint things outside with spray paint and it's just blowing away in the wind. It's a beautiful, warm day for March in the Northeast. Great for spray paint except for the breeze. Would be great after we wanted it to dry, but not while I'm trying to spray. So we're going to run into issues there. Then we've got some lettering and stuff to put in these window openings and a couple, you know, items for out here. We got to frig with those trees still, and I've just been avoiding that. I'm really hoping that it just goes without any issue, but we'll come back and check those out when it's turning into a way bigger project than I thought it was, and I'm pulling my hair out. So count on that. Everybody loves to watch Chaz lose it. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you.